So let's go ahead and get right to it so you can decide if you would like to listen to this video more. I'm going to be reading some passages from this very impactful book to me, War in the Soul by Dr. Edward Tick. And I'm going to be reading some passages from this because this is very important to me. I don't know, a lot of you out there have different beliefs. Not really believing that there is anything more than this life here, not knowing the difference between spirit and soul, so I'm going to go over that. But I don't have a lot of validation necessarily to say, or memories when it comes to reincarnation in other lives, but I do know with this book that I have cried, I have slept with this book, and you would have thought that I was a veteran in a past life, even though both of my fathers have served. So when it comes to that, so just try to keep an open mind when you're going to listen to this episode, that I'm going to be talking about some things that might be considered esoteric. But I wanted to address spirit and soul because sometimes those are used interchangeably. Okay, so my resource comes from the Ritberger Institute in El Dorado Hills, California, which is no longer around, but she is still around, Carol Ritberger. Nearly every spiritual tradition, both ancient and contemporary, alludes to the fact that the soul is immortal and that it will return back into physical form so it can continue its spiritual journey of refinement. These traditions even suggest that the soul, prior to its birth, determines the lessons it wants to learn and chooses the ways through which those lessons will be learned. They propose that the soul has in-depth conversations with its spirit guides and with the other souls who will share in its incarnation, and that a sacred bond is agreed upon with all of these souls prior to its incarnation. It's helpful to realize that the soul and spirit aren't the same, even though they're often used interchangeably. We need to recognize that while intangible, it's the soul that's the impetus behind the evolutionary process and that serves as a catalyst for change. And it's the spirit that serves as the energetic lifeline between the soul, the mind, and the body. The soul is defined as our core essence. It's the source of our aliveness. It serves as our inner navigator as we move through life, always guiding us forward on our spiritual journey. The soul provides the energetic vitality that animates our physical body and helps sustain us in our darkest times. The soul energetically imprints the journey of our life between birth and death and contains the archival history of all that we have experienced on the physical earth plane, both in the current and in past lifetimes. The soul's focus of the soul, is on the quality of life and in the relationships we develop. As we move forward through the cycles of life, the soul records energetically in the cells of the body and our energy body what we've learned from our experiences. It's these elements that are of the greatest value and the true gifts of life. In the evolutionary process, it's the soul's purpose to attract experiences that will help us learn, grow, expand, and evolve as we may transcend the unhealthy ways of thinking that limit who we are and that help prevent us from living a healthy life. The spirit defined. Spirit refers to our energetic nature and serves as the lifeline connecting the soul, the mind, and the physical body. It's the communication interface between the three and makes it possible for the soul to express its intentions through human experience. On and on and on. Spirit is merely the energetic vehicle used to broadcast these thoughts that we have externally, and then to receive the experiences of those thoughts, attracting them. Okay, I may have worded that wrong. Okay, the spirit's purpose is the energetic interpreter of the soul's intentions and is responsible for distributing those intentions throughout the body. The energy of spirit, as with the soul, utilizes the intuition, imagination, creativity, symbolism, and metaphors created in the right hemisphere of the brain as a means of expression. The purpose of spirit is to assist the soul in its physical expression and to energetically communicate when thoughts are impeding its ability to do so. There's so much more and so much deeper knowledge there for those of you that want to pursue reading. That is from my Soul Connections manual class. Okay, so let me just read a couple of clips over here. This may be on Audible. He has more books that I have not gotten to yet. But basically, as a result of all he's been working with veterans for over 30 years. We're talking about Dr. Edward Tick here, and traveling the world and trying to answer questions that he had, like, does the wound we call PTSD result from violent combat in all times and places? Is it unique to the Vietnam War and wars since? Does it result from American ways of fighting or treating veterans? All these questions that he had. And so he addresses how we need to look at how we think about war and not becoming lost within it. We can't escape it. So we do need to address it and understand what it is and how it works in all times and places. And basically he went and studied with different societies. And so what he talks about in this book and the path to healing is blending all of these different traditions from different cultures. And that's probably also why I love this book. I also love this book because it helps explain some questions I had at a very young age regarding veterans. Veterans specifically, I was always wondering what happened if they did things outside of their morals, if they were commanded to do so, and all that those sorts of questions and more. So he takes from Greek traditions, Native American, shamanic, Vietnamese, and he explains through the different techniques. Purification, storytelling, healing journeys, grieving, rituals, meeting with former enemies, soul retrievals, initiation ceremonies, and more. He basically says that these journeys help heal the rifts between vets and the non-vets and between former enemies. They facilitate initiation as men and warriors and offer understanding, acceptance, and honor. These efforts must be guided by principles consistent with our understanding of identity development and soul work. It's really a very necessary step to understand that this ancient belief in taking an eye for an eye, seeking punishment and revenge on those who have hurt them, this ancient strategy continues the world's wounding in an endless cycle of violence. Instead, we can give new meaning to this eye for an eye by returning what we have taken and exchanging understanding and forgiveness. This is a necessary moral step, even in good wars, even if we believe we did no wrong. War teaches hard lessons. What we lose, we lose. After war or other traumatic loss, we are different forever. We can neither get the old self back nor return to a state of innocence. We have been through a psycho-spiritual death. And more and more. And the other parts that I wanted to read, he talks a lot about how important it is to share the veterans, to share their stories, and for the community to basically embrace them and be willing to listen, right? Not cause them to be repressed or judgmental or anything, to embrace it. And this also a very important part that I wanted to talk about that I think that needs to be addressed in our culture especially is the third step in healing the warrior, which concerns the role played by us as society. Inevitably, veterans will assign responsibility for war to our government, presidents, Congress, and generals. This is no mere psychological defense, nor is it just an individual's refusal to accept fate or accountability, as indeed one of our nation's old enemies understood. Ho Chi Minh, during the Vietnam War, told his people neither to hate nor to blame ordinary American GIs for their participation in the invasion of his country. Hold the leaders responsible, he counseled. Fight the GIs, but remember that they are victims too. Our leadership's refusal to accept responsibility for our wars helps explain the rage and mistrust veterans and their families often feel towards authority. The young man or woman, after all, went to war in the nation's name. Except in rare instances, a soldier did not kill because he was criminal or insane or possessed by selfish motives. To the contrary, and while striving under most adverse conditions, he killed because his nation ordered him to do so in its service. Ultimately, he killed because otherwise he and his companions would be killed themselves. The nation and its leaders defined the enemy, provided moral and ideological reasons to go to war, trained the soldier for it, and put him in the kill or be killed situation. In Plains cultures, a war leader was held responsible for the casualties of his command. His people expected him to carry that difficult responsibility and judged him adversely if he did not. So should it be today. Our society must accept the responsibility for its war making. You did this in our name, and because you were subject to our orders, we lift the burden of your actions from you and take it onto our shoulders. We are responsible for you, for what you did, and for the consequences. This is what our leaders and people must say to the returning veteran. Without this transfer of responsibility, the veteran becomes the nation's scapegoat and carries its secret grief and guilt for us all. Psychologically and socially, veterans often crawl into the dark corners of our culture and collapse under the crippling effect of carrying the moral and spiritual burdens of an entire nation alone. The state of affairs helps explain the degree to which veterans become ill with their feelings. Given our nation's denial of responsibility and disowning of suffering, the only socially acceptable role left for them to collapse into is that of disabled veteran. It is this abandonment of them as much as the war experience that causes PTSD. Lastly, once the collective assumes responsibility for the war, the veteran's PTSD symptoms begin to disappear. The vet can stand with dignity, for even if the war was immoral or ill-advised, even if we did not win, he or she is still our honorable warrior, returned from a war fought in our service. It is imperative for the health of our veterans that they experience other ordinary Americans and our leadership as walking with them and accepting accountability for our wars. So, there is a lot more information in here and stories and lots of good things in here. So I would encourage you to check this out if you are interested in this subject matter, definitely helping us understand a little bit more about PTSD from a totally different perspective. He is a transformational healer and psychotherapist, Dr. Edward Tick. He is amazing. He is still continuing on with this work and trying to explain to others how important all of this is in healing veterans, recognizing them, paying attention, not putting them in a different class of people. I think that's another part of what our country does too, and is very not true. And so I am glad to have met him and had on my show, and I hope that you check it out. Once again, War in the Soul by Dr. Edward Tick. You can find out more if you go online. Okay, so hope that helped you in one way or another learn about all of this from a different perspective. Okay, see you in the next video.